Okay, so I've been looking at the situation of all these hurricanes that have taken place in Florida and also happening in New Zealand at the same time. And what goes through my mind is the issue about threefold. Is number one is, should I really actually be adding into this particular conversation? Because at the end of the day, this is for some people this is an incredibly emotional subject because it's their lives, and do I really have a right to weigh in there? I think I do, because I'm not trying to tell you that this is going on, and I think that's the difference. Is that I'm not talking about. I think a lot of people, it's very good to ask questions, and there's a lot of reasons to be cynical of the government, but I think a lot of people confuse the idea of belief with proof, and that is to say they believe something, and that therefore becomes a fact. And I think, like for example, chemtrails are good. A lot of people believe in chemtrails. Okay, now I believe in chemtrails. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are actually true. I, on the other hand, think that I can prove that chemtrails exist because of the fact that I can point you to numerous sources and point out this is cloud seeding. And then people turn around and will come back to me and say, but no, cloud seeding silver iodine. I'm going like, yeah, but do you know what silver iodine is actually called? No. Well, it's barium phosphate. So it's actually the same thing that basically people who have been studying this subject for a long time have been saying. So actually, yes, that technology does exist. And I think one of the things, a couple of programs you might want to have a look at is motor pool, mud lava, and from the southern hemisphere viewpoint, you want to look at the snowy mountain hydro system, which the very important, again, key factor in that one is that program actually there was more to the snowy mountain hydro than basically just coming up with water. The key person put in charge of it at the beginning of that project was I can't remember his first name, but it was Dr. Professor Leach, who was a colonel during the World War II. He was a military scientist. He was one of the highest, he had access to the highest levels of classified material, and he worked on Operation SEAL, which is its purpose was to create a tsunami bomb. And this was going to actually be the plan B. They couldn't get the nuclear bomb built in time. And again, when you read a lot of like mainstream reporting on it, they really downplay it, and they quite often actually misquote what's actually in the primary documents, which I've actually gone and looked at, along with the study of the sun, which Professor Leach actually initiated. And I believe the timing. Now this is the belief versus the proof. I believe the timing of when that study was initiated was basically right around about the same time of the Manhattan Project, when they let off the nuclear bomb. And when that bomb exploded, it made the sun pulsate because of the gamma rays. And we're only starting to understand this right now. For example, the New Zealand Herald's putting out a warning about two solar storms actually moving towards the Earth at this particular moment. Now, civilian scientists didn't really understand the implications of what the solar energy had on life on Earth until basically the 1990s, when they finally got to go up into a military high altitude plane with a high speed camera, and they started to photograph these things which started to have names like Blue Elf and Sprites and Red, all these kind of crazy names. Basically what they were was big powerful electric storms. And the civilian scientists only really started to begin to understand it in the 1990s, whereas the military had been studying this stuff since the 1945. So again, we move forward into the one of the key things that people used to go against cloud seeding, the idea that you can cause weather and earthquakes. Oh, no, the propagation, the power signals aren't powerful enough. Well, that might have been true in 1950. Now, since the 1990s, we started to develop HAARP, which again had a minimal area because the signal could only reach so far, and so you were very limited about where you could actually use that technology, but it was part of the research and development. And if you actually look before HAARP 1998, you go back to Royal Australian Air Force Base Laverton, which is right next to where the cult Sharinka was based, turned up. And when they turned up within about 35 days of their being there was a big earthquake right where they were, and a big huge explosion in the sky over Perth, which was seen, it was in the newspapers because everybody saw it. And Harry Mason went and did a lot of research on it, and it's interesting because unfortunately a lot of that stuff wasn't really recorded, like the primary stuff at the time. And since then, it's either gone missing, it's been online content has been actually altered, or Harry Mason's claims or the stuff that's been downplayed or made to kind of like, that's something important. When my understanding when I looked at those documents was that he was really onto something here. Likewise, there was a very famous quote there basically about the Secretary of Defense, William Cohen, saying that basically terrorist organizations, and I believe in the original version, which is I think has been altered, stated cults. I actually mentioned on the radio, but within about a month, that part, which I'd taken from, was still up on the Pentagon's own briefing site, that had been taken out. But nevertheless, the symposium was held at Georgetown by Sam Nunn, who had also sat on the same committee to look at whether the cult had been carrying out experiments into basically causing earthquakes technology when they were in Australia. There were two investigations of this. So that gives you an idea that the authorities at least took this initially very, very seriously. And Sam Nunn is kind of like, he's like the smoking cancer man in the X-Files. Like, he's the guy that knew where all the bodies were because largely he put them there. So that he was holding the symposium. That's again is a very big red flag that this was a very serious topic, and it was held at Georgetown University, sometimes referred to as the University of of Spookyville, and we'll leave it at that. He went ahead and had the symposium, which basically said this technology is quite doable. And this was in the 1990s, when again the propagation was still in its infancy. Now what we're looking at now is from around the world, but also from our here peninsula, we've been launching these satellites which are from Japanese companies, very much linked into the same Japanese military industrial companies that the cult Sharinko were involved in. And again, Harry Mason does some very excellent work looking at their links to far-right organizations in the Japanese government, and some really excellent. So, like, even example, the siren that they cult used was very unique because the siren that they used was actually American design, which basically means that it came in two different parts and you had to put together before they initiated each other. And at that stage, there was only one place in the world up until that cult carried out the attack that you could actually had that formula, which was basically Fort Detrick's, the United States of America's research facility. So again, it was very kind of like, this is very kind of interesting. So what we're now launching is things called OWL. The name just sticks, the goddess of basically natural disasters and destruction. And OWL stands for Objects with Life. Okay, so basically they're looking at us and doing studies, and they're using all this stuff as geospatial technology. Now, belief proof. Okay, let's keep this point very, very solid, very, very important. The proof of geospatial technology being able to use for land grabs, you only have to look towards Cyclone Gabriel, which is the case. It doesn't even have to do anything. The geospatial technology is able to record such detailed information that it can give town planners huge advantages. So they can know where the storms are going to run, what the damage is going to be done. This is like quantum level computing, almost like think about Minority Report. So while we had all these programs, again, massive funding, no one's actually asking where this money's coming from or where it was. Very, very total absence of transparency. Another big red flag going on there. None of this, we funded it, largely we funded a lot of it, and none of it was actually really made available to the public, but it was kept on for people who are into things like making money out of carbon credit trading and so on. And the end result was that when the floodings occurred for places that shouldn't be built where they were built, basically all those people were going to lose their properties basically, so because they get 10, 20 cents, whatever it is, not even half of what they actually paid or invested in it. And all that land in 5 years' time will be land swapped. It'll be bought up by the forestry industry, the people that didn't clean up their slashing, so they caused the damage. Voila, they end up with this big pocket of land, which they can then turn around, grow trees all over, and get all the carbon credits for it. And you can go and look at things like Goldman Sachs and Vanguard and see how these guys are heavily invested in this industry. So that's without even having, you can prove that this is what's going on. And all around the world, if you read very diligently and not just do your homework, but do your due diligence, which basically means okay, I've got this thing saying here, can I find 3 or 4 other reasonably credible sources that will back it up as well? That's the difference between doing your homework and due diligence. The short version is, yes, you can find lots of information around the world. There is very much a land grab going on, and this is the thing that we then gives us a kind of the modus, our solving any crime, or the formula is the same: modus, opportunity, method, mode, and opportunity. So there's your motive for potential. That basically these kind of events can be utilised there is a winner and a loser out of these whole things. That still doesn't prove, however, that what's happening in this weather events that are happening at the moment are all caused by geoengineering. And there is a thing called climate change, and you can argue all you like about what causes it. And I think that point's actually irrelevant. It's happening. And So people turn around and say, oh, this is all geoengineering. No, it actually is climate change. Now, what the cause is, okay, I'm not going to go there because reality, hardcore admission, I have no idea about the maths. I have no right to speak about anything about the expertise of it. That's the reality. I'll stick to my bowling alley. But cause aside, it is happening. And what is also very evident to me is that the technology for things like cloud seeding, if you've got an area that's going to be, really, really in the area of increased rain because of climate change, then turn around and putting rainmaking devices in those areas is kind of like basically suicide. That's what we're actually seeing. That's where it gets interesting, where we start to have some facts backing up the question about whether or not these events are being, I won't say man-made, but man-amped. Because this is the thing I think about this technology is it loves extreme weather events, and by itself it has minimal effect, especially if the propagation, the signal strength isn't very strong. No, it can't happen. But you combine a whole bunch of things together with extreme weather plus solar events, which are going to increase your propagation of your technology out there. Then we start to cook with gas, and this is what concerns me. Is that there's a wonderful, if you look on my Facebook page and on my website later on, there's a site or a link which I've already downloaded to make sure, because I imagine it's not going to last very long, but it puts out all of the spatial geoengineering technology happening all around the Earth. And again, lots of environmentalists are starting to get the fact that this is something we should be talking about. For years we dismissed it. Now people are starting to get to it, because most of this technology, while it has the potential to help us, the three problems with it is, number one is most of it's not being done transparently and it's been done for profit. That is self-explanatory. Number two is the aspect that the money that's coming for, the money being provided for it, is basically coming from organisations that don't have a great human rights record or environmental record for that matter. So that's again, and don't have a very good ethical record. So, giving a bandit a machine gun, probably not a good idea. And that's what we're seeing with all this geoengineering technology. It's in the wrong hands. Thirdly, is it's not just a lack of transparency, it's a maintaining a fiction, so that all along the way people say, oh no, geoengineering doesn't exist, or no, the people conspiracy theories, so they're trying to downplay that this technology exists, or instead of like having a frank and honest conversation saying, wow, this stuff's really amazing, but maybe we need to talk about the good stuff and the bad side of it, and then we can have a really sound sound conversation about what checks and balances do we put in place so that when we're using this technology, because it all has the potential to help us. It's not, the technology in itself isn't bad, and this is another point I want to bring you guys into. Go and have a look at a guy called Julian Carver. Now, Julian Carver was a geospatial specialist. He was actually considered the leading man in his field. He did most of the geospatial work in Christchurch, which was when it was really first rolled out after the first Christchurch earthquake, which I've covered that topic in beforehand, and I say, you've got to look at the motive, the method, and the operated. Did they have a motive? Was the hardware in place? Was the money in place? Was the experimentation research in place? And when you go look at Christchurch, and as I've done in the past, there's like nearly 15 ticks. So again, I can't prove that Christchurch was a quake, and there's all these people out there, and you see stuff on YouTube and so on, and the usual suspects jump up and they take the information, they twist it around, which is part of the whole game as well. And people get all excited because they confuse their beliefs with proof. But what I can say with my research is that there is a strong correlation factor, like as strong as enough to say that smoking causes cancer. I'd say that the potential for geoengineering to have been a triggered event in at least one or two of the Christchurch and Kaikoura earthquakes is, I would put as high as maybe 80 to 90% high. It's all the technology, the money, the people, they were all there, all happening at the same time. All the conditions were ticking. So when we compare that comparison finally, and also just go back to Julian Carver, because this person he's like Stephen Jennings. He's one person that people should all know about, but nobody does. Julian Carver was a very amazing guy, and he pointed out this technology was like the genie out of the bottle stuff, and he said, it had the potential to cure many of the world's woes, but it also had the potential to be used as a tool of creating tyranny, and this is why he campaigned fearlessly with him and the open source ninjas. Literally, that was their name, to make sure that this technology got out into the public arena and people knew about it and that they were educated on it, because if they don't, it can be really, really used badly by those people at Goldman Sachs and the usual suspects with the usual ethical record that's, makes Jack the Ripper look like a good citizen. Julian Carver, however, in the end of the day, got abducted off the streets of Christchurch. He was taken to a mental facility where he actually died. And as I'm aware of it, 5 years later, his family still did not know why this man who ran $1 million company and was extremely, highly respected by his colleagues, not just respected, I mean extremely respected. This guy said that the moon was made of cheese. You could bet your bloody ass it was made of cheese. But instead, he ended up in a mental asylum, and the family and his friends have no idea why. And they have no idea why he died or what occurred. And there are quite a few deaths around that place, which, I won't go into that subject, but I think his death absolutely reeks. And I think mostly what I can say without proving that anything happened to him is that it clued me onto actually how significant geo mapping people need to know about. And again, look at these experiments. There are articles about that have been carried out by companies like Nearmap, and the company that was run by one of the guys that was on the Titanic submarine that imploded. In fact, all those guys that were on that submarine were heavily involved in AI and next generation level technology, as so were the guys on the Bayesian and about 7 other billionaires that have died this year, although most of what they were studying was actually more to do with actually mass surveillance. And so, when you look at the Israelis, how they managed to get 9,000 pages into the hands of Hamas, that's because they were using this technology to track down all the senior management, basically, of Hamas. I think Lavender is the program that they use. And so they were using this stuff to basically, and again, they used this stuff previously during the Indonesian to track down potential leaders of East Timor, and they were systematically assassinated, and then people killed around them to make it look like it was just a mass murder when there actually was a targeted assassination. And then those places basically ended up in debt, which they had to borrow money off the World Bank, and the World Bank's conditions was, let us come in and drill for oil and da-da-da-da-da. And again, when you start to look at the Indonesian earthquake, there are actually lawsuits out there about basically the oil companies' role in actually potentially having helped trigger that tsunami, because they were doing a version of fracking. Because again, it doesn't have to be all electric-on. There are different ways that you can trigger geo, and one of the things is actually just pumping water at high speeds. That if you do it in the right places, bang, you can have the same result. I think it was Dr. Kirimov, who was a Russian scientist, and he does a paper exactly explaining about it's focusing on leverage. And what he's basically saying is that if you use the right, it's like in a keto. If you use the right spot, you don't need a massive amount of energy to actually trigger a flip. And brings us back to back to the situation in Florida and New Zealand. Now, what I would say is I wouldn't say it is as high as 90%, and I would say that a lot of these events, these places, they were going to be subject because, as I keep pointing out, I am not a climate change denier. When it comes to the cause, I will freely admit my ignorance. I have talked to friends of mine that are very in-depth scientists, and they give me extremely good explanations about why climate change is actually happening because of the carbon sink aspect of it. And basically what they point out is they're saying is that, yes, volcanoes and blah, blah, blah use it, but what's happening is that we are impacting it at a higher rate than it's able to replenish, and that's the real issue. But I can also talk to people that are actually also, I've had read papers of people, scientists who are very, very well educated, that deny it's climate change. And I, as a journalist, look at them and go, hey, I'm the guy that got less than 70% in math statistics, so it's all above my pay grade, and I have to admit I don't know which person's speaking the truth. I would say follow the money, but in this case, often that money ends up in both places at the same place. The people denying it and the people promoting it are the same, and that's, I find, very, very, very odd in itself. But I would say that what could occur in the situation in Florida is that the potential for people who want to make money out of the area and they want to use that geospatial technology to use this disaster to their advantage, using things like Owl 141, I think was the one that just got launched from Rocket Lab on August the 2nd. That technology, what I need to next look at in my next research, which is kind of hard because I'm doing another project at the moment and I'm on the road. But what I'd be looking at right now is I'd be going to what specifically was launched at what sites, what their geospatial orbit is, and then going around and looking at where that technology is. So like a risk board, do you see a little satellite of that particular right over Florida? And then it goes back to my issue about proof and belief, in which case we start to see we've got this issue of motive, and now we've got hardware appearing. And I will say, from having looked in the United States and some of the technology I'm finding for cloud seeding and where it's located on that map I spoke to you about beforehand, yeah, there is some hardware there. However, I haven't done enough research on that particular technology to find out actually, is it a 1 or is it a 10? And these places, hurricanes do happen. This climate change is occurring. But the potential, if you know what you're doing to use this disaster for your advantage, is there. So, it's quite funny because I saw a map, and I'll end it with this. I saw a map basically recently showing the four hurricanes, and that had the names on them: Exxon, Shell, Chevron. By the way, who are all supporters of the United Nations Sustainable Goals Development Plan, Agenda 2030. It's quite amazing when you go and look at the list of people who actually sponsor that program, which is meant to be about improving the planet's environment and how we treat each other. It's largely reads, its funders largely read like a who's who of some of the biggest scumbags on the planet. So again, when you're looking at these guys at the steering wheel, it makes me nervous, and I wish we could have this conversation where it doesn't have to be about I believe or I don't believe, and maybe we should just listen to each other, and we might actually learn something. Where's a crazy idea? But anyway, this map had all these, Chevron, these different hurricanes named after these different energy monopoly guys. And I have to say, whether you want to believe in climate change has been caused by the fossil fuel industry, or you want to believe that it's actually caused by opportunists using these events to either amp them up or create them. I don't think they can be created wholesale. You need. I might not know about math, but I know about energy. But you can certainly fucking boost them up. It still boils down to you end up with whichever theory you believe. That map actually is correct. And I think, what the real bad guy, what I find in 45 years of studying this stuff is that within 2 degrees of separation, you always come back to it's follow the money, the first law of investigative journalism 101. And it's always the same with these corporations, the same corporations. And to me, that's where we're all missing it out. We should be going after these corporations and making the very existence of corporations is what's creating this organic AI monster that's not 12 guys sitting around cracking their knuckles going, Illuminati, it's the fact that the machine itself leans itself towards it, always has to make more money. So inevitably, the same outcomes occur whether you did have 12 guys sitting around cracking their knuckles going, and until we dismantle that machine, that's what it actually is, we're screwed. The human race is writing itself out of existence by being controlled by the system. And the system, in some ways, it has become self-aware. And again, that gets the whole issue of corporations. No corporation has one guy at the top going, but you do have a series of corporations where systems can be increasingly, as you move up the top of the level, they're increasingly compartmentalized. And if your goal is let's make money, the ethical line gets very, very blurred. So corporations can be involved in projects that they're not even necessarily aware. The guy at the top doesn't even necessarily know that he's aware. That's especially when we start looking at things like Lockheed Martin and Boeing and all these guys. But again, this in the outcomes is the aspect of these corporations will lead themselves towards doing very brutal and nasty things because they're singular, like an AI system. They have a singular goal, which is to make more money than they made the year beforehand, and that's permutation. So again, AI is not neither good nor bad, but when your guy writing your permutations is the military-industrial complex and the banks, who are kind of like the Voldemorts and the Darth Vaders, then you're not going to get a Gandalf the White and Dumbledore outcome. And that's the reality. So while people get very, very pissy at people talking about conspiracy theories with hurricane, in some ways they shouldn't be, because really both sides are talking about the same thing. Hurricane, fossil fuel caused by Shell, Boeing, Lockheed military industrial complex because of the way we treat the planet, or actually caused by these guys deliberately because they're using it to make an opportunity. It's still true. Both arguments actually have some merit in them. So that's my more than 5 cents on the topic, and I'm going to put this one up on my next shipping news for you guys. And if you think it's really actually quite valuable what I'm saying, please do go ahead and actually share this information. That's the best way. Like gone from 135,000 people in the mid 1990s to the algorithms controls against, and I don't advocate violence. You try to source my material very, very, very thoroughly. I don't just do my homework. I do my due diligence. I source it very, very thoroughly. I try to be very reasonable, but nevertheless, the machine has decided that I am a dissenting voice, and so it largely has crushed me from 135,000. Well, I'm on someone's I piss them off lists to I now get about 400 a month. So if you want to get this information out, because obviously I have something to say, because you know you don't get put to the top of the list for you know. Anyway, share it, and if you do want to actually support what I'm doing, get in touch with me via email. I'll give you my banking details. Now, my deal's very, very straightforward. If you give me $100, you don't even have to give me $100, but if you give me up to $100, then you become on my list, on my subscribers list, and that all goes to the government tax department, and it gets declared as income, as it should, rightly should, because I want to build hospitals and roads like everybody else. And I declare it. And if you give me more than 100, please do that in a separate amount, because I take that as a gift. You don't have to do it because you can return. You're now doing that because simply you like what I'm doing. So my website is the Postman Production, the Dyslexic Detective. You can find me there. I have a basically section for my books, which are free. Again, if you do download a book, making a donation or instantaneously makes you a subscriber. Being a subscriber, by the way, also means that you're free to contact me. Like contact me through Facebook. Ask me a couple of questions, my opinion, or if you want to know some facts, I'll actually help. I'll give you a bit of research in return. I'm not going to be your 24/7 on-call researcher, but I will do my best throughout the year to give back what I've been given. I don't believe in getting stuff for free. That's for you under $100. If you're doing more than that, you're just doing it because you want to do it, and it's a gift. Okay, it's not a tip; it's a gift, and you do that separately. So then, that's where we're at, and on my website, the books are there. You'll find a section there for my shipping news, which I put out once a month. There is Ben's World, which as I'm traveling around, I'm finding cool stuff, and I'm putting photographs up there, and that's mostly visual stuff. And then we have another one section, which is just basically kind of like different places that I've approved of in New Zealand, and I'll be doing something similar for my world travels when I get back. And again, these guys are not paid advertisers. These are people actually, to be honest, some of them actually are, but I haven't asked them for any money in years. They're just there because I like them. And it's and I like to, I find a good place. I like to actually, give you a review without you knowing that I'm actually getting paid. I do have a newspaper. I put advertisers in it, and that's how I make my money off those guys. And again, that all gets declared and goes for the tax department. We put that out once a year at the moment because simply it's very time consuming, and it's very hard to make. Printing costs have gone up a hell of a lot, so it's very hard for me to get that information out. So I'm very much a voice in the wilderness, and I accept that. But we do what we can do, and I hope you enjoy my information.